To install the lights in your rangefinder topper, you will need a soldering iron, solder, your Fett Servo kit, a hollow rangefinder stock, a rangefinder topper, a Perspex block or equivalent, the included LEDs, the included little circuit board, more on that later, as well as the included wires, which I've already run through my rangefinder stock. The optional little circuit board helps connect everything together and make the connections a little easier to work with inside the topper. If the LED slots align with your topper, you should have no problem using it. If they're really close, you can leave a little bit of distance between the LEDs and the board and bend the LEDs into position. Just make sure that the leads don't touch. Here's how the wiring will work. The positive of the white LED will go to the W. If you're not using the little circuit board, just connect it to the W on the main board. The positive of the top LED goes to the T, or the T on the main board. The positive of the bottom red LED goes to the B, or the B on the main board. All of the negatives will be wired together and connected to the negative on the main board. If you're using the topper, just run the wires from each letter to each letter. The last 3 pins are used for the servo, so you can ignore those for wiring the rangefinder topper. The T, or top LED, is the LED that is in the top position when the rangefinder is down. So this is top, this is bottom, top, bottom. To begin, you want to solder on the red LEDs, and it's important to solder these on in the right orientation so that they can poke through the top when the board is inserted. If you solder them to the wrong side of the board, you won't be able to do that properly. Generally, this means the red LED should be soldered on the side of the board without the circles. On LEDs, the longer lead is the positive lead and the shorter lead is negative. If you cut the leads and forget which side is which, the negative side also has a flat edge on the base of the LED. On the topper board, the square hole is for the negative lead, so put the shorter lead through the square hole and solder it all together. Before I solder everything together, I'm going to make sure that I have the LEDs in the right orientation. And it looks like I do. You want this side of the circuit board up against the wall of the topper so that the LEDs can poke through the top like this. The white LED should go on the opposite side of the red LEDs. It may also be useful to solder the white LED a little farther away from the circuit board so you can bend it as needed to reflect into the block or fit into the topper. I don't do that with mine, however. Now it's time to solder it all together. After I insert the LEDs into the circuit board, I like to bend the prongs apart just a little bit to help hold the LEDs onto the circuit board. After they're soldered on, I take a pair of wire snippers and cut off the extra leads. When soldering, you don't want to leave the soldering iron on for too long because your goal is to just melt the solder, not fry the components. So if you leave your soldering iron on the leads of the LED, that heat can travel down into the LED and fry it. So just leave the heat on long enough to melt the solder and pull it away. With the LED soldered onto the circuit board, we're going to take our rangefinder stock and run the wires through. Feed the wires in through the bottom and out through the top. And if you're using a metal one like I am, make sure you don't accidentally cut the wires on the metal when running them up. With the wire run through the stock, take some wire strippers and strip the ends of each of the 4 wires. After doing so, twist the ends of the wire to keep the copper together. This makes future steps easier and is just good practice to always twist your stripped wire. Make sure you run the wires through the topper before soldering anything. I've made this mistake plenty of times and requires you to completely resolder it because you can't fit the components through the little hole on the topper. When soldering the wires to the circuit board or the components, it doesn't really matter which color goes to what component, just as long as you remember what you attach to what. This is important because when you go to plug it into the main circuit board, you need to make sure that everything matches. And you don't want to accidentally plug the positive of a white LED into the red LED or vice versa, as they run on slightly different voltages. If you end up using the circuit board, it's also easier to solder the wires onto the side with the letters. That way the wires don't have to wrap down and around the board to get out of the topper. After it's all soldered together, I'm going to do a systems check with my servo kit just to make sure that everything does work as expected. So I'm going to plug each wire into the corresponding letter that I soldered it to up on the main board. Perfect, it looks like all the lights are working. I'm going to put a little bit of hot glue on the wire leads just to make sure they don't pop off while I'm finagling it up into the topper. Now it's time for final assembly. I have a Machinecraft replica stock, so there are tapped holes on the top that are meant to attach the topper. For this, I've bought some number 4x40 by 1/4 socket head screws to use to screw the topper onto the stock. If you don't want to mess with this, glue works just fine. To screw everything together, I'm going to use needle nose pliers and angled needle nose pliers to get the screws in and tighten them up. The socket top of the screw is advantageous for this because it allows me to grab the screw and turn them tight. With the topper attached to the stock, it's time for another systems check and then to attach the Perspex block. Mounting the servo into your helmet will be another video, and I'll link to that when it's uploaded. If you have any questions or any issues, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always available to answer more questions. And if you need to pick up your own servo kit, head over to neopropshop.com/servo and buy one today.